these different learning approaches that are part of that we have adopted. And then for you in computer science and other computing uh, professions, or do I call it courses, I'd like to encourage you because the profession is dynamic. We keep having a lot of development and changes every day. New technologies, new innovations keep coming up, and you are the drivers of these technologies, you are the drivers of these systems. You have the market. The Nigerian environment is still at a primitive stage, and the country is waiting for you to sharpen your skills, equip yourself so that you can transform the country. So at the curriculum level, so much is being done. Before now, there has been this whole curriculum which has been in existence over the years. I think the last one was 2007. But now, in this 2020, 2021, yes, this year, NUC announced a new curriculum which is aimed at bridging the gap between the schools and the industry. So you are better positioned, you'll be better served. You're going to see a lot of changes that will bring you closer to sharpening, or do I say sharpening your skills to face the market. The issue of unemployment, the issue of what do we call it? They complain by a lot of industry players that a lot of students are unemployable, are not employable. We believe that with this approach, that gap, that problem will be addressed. So keep learning through the books, through such conferences, through workshops, and we as a university, we are also making efforts to ensure that we provide for you the industry interaction and relationship that will equip you for your career growth and development. For example, we are in touch. There's an MOU which we just signed with Coursera that will make some courses available for you, industry-based courses that will sharpen your skills. So we are looking at that, yes, these courses will be at beginners and at intermediary levels. And then there are other MOUs that we have signed with other industry players like Cisco and Oracle and others. So we are making effort in order to see that you are well equipped, and we hope that you will continue to enjoy yourself, open up your minds, be free and learn, so that the school will not only pass through you, you will also pass through the school, and you will go out as ambassadors of now. So I wish you um, fruitful deliberations, discussions, and interactions. And we are looking forward to having a communique from you at the end of the conference so that it will help us to know your level of interaction and the areas that you feel we need to improve upon. So thank you so much for your time, and
Yes,
I
sir.
hope you will enjoy the rest of the program.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much. Really appreciate for the address. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to us. We will definitely improve that. And we've been seeing a lot of differences based on the Nigerian National of Computing Students in general. That is, we've been trying to put things in place regarding technology. There are innovators among us, those that are ready to learn, those that are ready to put things in place in technology. And by God's grace, we are bringing the technology in us out so that students can be able to develop themselves in any area of specialization in programming, in tech, any area of experts. That is, those that are good among us will be able to develop themselves. Those that are still coming up will still be able to develop them. Even those that are already experts can be able to put those that are not known anything, put us through. And this is why we are having this kind of conference to make sure students of the National Open University can defend themselves anywhere they find themselves. Not basically on what the school teach them, but what we ourselves are putting, at least the knowledge we are impacting on ourselves during this kind of conferences that we're trying to put on. And we believe that during this kind of conference would be a lot of impact to students in general. That is, no computer science student of the national community, they should be able to go outside there and defend themselves of what they are doing, of what the course they are doing. At least they should be proud of themselves. And this is what we're trying to do. And by God's grace, we've been seeing those innovators, we've been seeing people that are good, that are even talented, and is trying to make sure that technology as themselves, they are trying to build ambitions, they're trying to build a community by themselves to make sure things are put into place. And by God's grace, since we have it by our side, we believe this will be achievable for us, and it will be easy for us to make sure this kind of program or this kind of conferences continue by the time we have your full support. And by God's grace, we are coming up with Edit Conference in Abuja, where every one of us, we are going to gather to make sure innovators are running this. We're going to be running hackathon, we're going to be running challenges. That is, students that are very, very good in what they are doing can come out to defend what they have. They can say, yes, I'm proudly a computing student and I can do this and I can do that. And that is why this kind of conference is coming up. And thank you. We really appreciate you for joining us today. Thank you very much, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you clearly, sir. So I don't know if you can hear me, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yes, I can hear you. You were breaking.
Yes,
I'm saying that the last time I spoke with some students, I did mention to you that yes, we are proud of what you're doing. You're making progress. In fact, if I tell you the number of recommendations letters that I signed on almost on daily basis, students that finish from the National Open University all over the world. I signed two this morning to one to Australia, and
wow.
then there's one also to US, and keep getting. Our students have been admitted all over the world. There is hardly any continent that our students are not after they finish the program with us. It will also interest you to note that out of the over 200 universities in Nigeria, the NUC rating places now as the best among the first as the first 20, and then the rating went the first 15. So out of over 200 universities in Nigeria today, so
Yes, sir.
you need to go up with your heads high, and then
Yes, sir.
you can compete with any student anywhere
Yes, sir. Exactly.
in this world. Just to you.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate. And that is just another.
All right. Thank you so much.
We will make sure we put everything in place regarding technology, and we are very sure ourselves by the time we'll be having edits conference in Abuja, we'll be seeing a lot of brilliant students coming out to say, yes, this is what I can offer to the society and to the entire country entirely, and this is what we are trying to make sure every one of us can be able to achieve. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. I need to join another meeting.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
All right, sir. You're welcome. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, continue the session.
Welcome, sir.
Okay. That was a nice one from our HUD, Mr. Frank.
So, despite the fact that the use of online platforms increased during the pandemic, right, you still have 3 billion people who have never been online. I guess the point here is that you being online today is quite a privilege, right? And you've taken one step closer to being a success in the tech space than people who have never been online. Yeah, that number is very accurate. It's been measured, right? So the United Nations International Telecommunication Union estimated that around 96% of even those 2.9 billion, 3 billion people are in developing countries, right? So the 3 billion that they're referring to is not evenly distributed across the world. 96% of that 3 billion is in developing nations, right? And you know what developing nations are. You probably have that Nigeria is one of the developing nations, right? So there's a lot of what comes of that 3 billion that is from this country. But of course, the other low, medium income countries across the world, it's not just Nigeria. India is there. Although India is sort of moved out of that. Yeah, but let me not get into that. Anyway, I think the first thing I want to establish before we move ahead is also the fact that technology is not synonymous with digital. There's a tendency for us to think that every time we hear tech or every time we hear technology, it is always digital. There are aspects of technology that has nothing to do with digital, right? Also remember that historically, what was tech never used to be computing. So we are in this tech age, but remember that tech has also technology precedes computing. Even though we're in the tech age, technology precedes computing. Digital is a closer synonym to computing, which is about counting and calculating. And so the question today is, if I'm not doing the counting and calculating, working with binaries, can I still succeed? Right? If I'm not building algorithms, can I still succeed? Yes, you can. And I'm going to talk about three things very quickly that point to that effect or to that fact that you can succeed. So next slide, please. So those three things I'm going to talk to you about is one, technical intuition, which is something you need to have, which you probably do have, but you have never thought about it as a capability, right? First, there are two things to note there. It's something you need to have and something that I think you might already have, but you've never considered it a capability because I guess no one told you. It's like a strength that you don't know is a strength. The second thing is being a researcher, right? Researchers can succeed in this tech world without writing codes. And then the last thing there is being a program manager. So program managers can also be a great success without building codes. Next slide. All right. Let me start by talking about intuition, right? Before I then do technical intuition. So according to Daniel Kahneman, the author of Fast and Slow Thinking, intuition is the ability to automatically generate solutions without long logical arguments or evidence. That is intuition. The ability to generate solutions without long logical arguments or evidence. You just know that this is it, right? Without the evidence or the process by which knowledge is being generated. People like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung didn't quite necessarily consider intuition as knowledge, and to an extent they are right. And I think Carl Jung also spoke about it as irrational. But intuition sort of lives beyond that. There are also aspects of intuition that are actually rational. There are aspects of it that are actually well-grounded knowledge. So intuition is the pattern matching process that quickly suggests feasible courses of action. So if you were faced with a problem or even a question, right? And the typical thing that you would do is to engage in a process of uncovering what the answer is. So either you search, you ask someone, you build maybe build a quick simulation or a program to resolve what that question is or what that problem is. You choose not to do any of those things, and then you just rely on an inner knowing that sort of connects patterns that you see. And it happens so quickly that sometimes you miss the fact that there is actually a mental process that is behind it. So intuition is not a lack of process, but it's rather a process that is that happens too quickly for you to actually recognize the fact that there was a technology itself. As some folks increasingly become technologists, they start to lose touch with problems and their own contextual awareness. But with your own technical intuition, you can keep them grounded. Technical intuition is that part of you that should be able to know what you want the technology to do for you, because you understand the context. You have an understanding of what the problem is. So because somebody can program doesn't necessarily mean that the person understands the problem better than you. And that itself is a capability. Because somebody is a developer does not necessarily mean that the person knows what you want the tech to do for you. So that is always something that you need to have, even when you come to a technologist, even when you come to a programmer or a developer. You must be able to know how you want the technology to work, In addition to those two, you also understand what technology can actually do. So you don't want technology to do all it can do. You want technology to do the things that are appropriate, right? So we speak of appropriate tech, right? You want technology to do the things that are appropriate for the context you're in and for the problem you want to solve. An example is this. If you wanted to bring a useful solution to hospital facilities in a rural area, and you imagine that, oh, we want to be able to check when doctors and nurses or hospital staff arrive at work. We also want the patients or the clinic guests to be able to give feedback on the kind of services that they are receiving. Or we want to even keep a track of medical records of clinic guests. Or we want to be able to use technology to, again, I'm just trying to imagine problems. We want to be able to use technology to inform mothers when their next immunization is, and then they're able to show up. The most functional solution in a situation like that would be to build an app, right? But the moment you start to think about the context, an app is no longer appropriate. First of all, there are all kinds of technological limitations, right? In that context, low internet access, people don't have smartphones, power issues, right? So the phones need to be charged before they can get used, right? Even the cost of acquiring those types of gadgets that use applications. And we just even heard at the start of this talk how 3 billion people have never been online, right? Instantly, you realize that even though an app looks like a great solution, it is not suitable for that specific context that you're in. You need something that is low tech in comparison to what looks like the best line of attack. Now, here's the difference. The job of a programmer or a developer is to think of the optimal. Well, let not say the job, because that would be the scale of assumption there seems too high. What you would find in most technologists, right, or most developers, is that they are trying to bring to bear their newest sense of how technology can be used, right? So they are pushing the boundaries. They are trying to bring out the highest performing metrics that they can in terms of what their tech can accomplish. But your job as someone who has technical intuition is to pull them back, rein them in, so that the tech that they are building is one that is applicable to the context you're in and the situation that you are working with, or the constraints and the limitations that are where you are, or the existing capabilities of the people that you're trying to work with. So this has nothing to do with you being able to write a line of code. It just means that you are using your common sense to know that, okay, I know what technology does, like I know this is what tech can accomplish, but I know that this is the situation in which I want to use this tech. And I realize that this is not the best line of action to take, but this is what is more appropriate. Next slide. So that's technical intuition. And I'm sure you might have some questions, and we'll get to that. The next thing that you can be that is very critical for this, for that is so critical that you can succeed with, but also it is a critical factor for the success of technology itself. Most technologists cannot succeed without research. If you take a look at all successful big tech companies, they have people who do these roles, particularly the user research and the UX research, right? And I'm going to say what they are in a bit. So user research is, these are studies that you conduct to understand the user, right? So you have somebody who's supposed to use your tech. You need to understand them. You need to understand them, understand their needs, understand their mental models, understand their behavior, their goals, and their motivations, right? An understanding of these aspects of a user is then used as raw material to inform the technology that you develop. Now, when it comes to design research, they are quite similar, but design research is more of a study that is done to inform design. A clear difference is this: in the user research case, there's a chance that there is already an existing design and there is a user in mind. You have a user in mind, right? So user research, oftentimes there's a design or there's a product. There's something that already exists for which we have associated a specific user. And so what the research is doing is looking at that user that is already identified and trying to understand what their right? And you just go in wanting to understand the existing constraints and capabilities of the context, the people, and the resources that you have as a designer, right? Trying to come up with a design. And like I said, it doesn't take the stance that there is a design in place. In fact, the interesting thing about design research is that it is one of those things that can actually tell you at the end of a design research process, it can actually tell you not to take an action. If you know what I mean. It's the kind of research that can advise you that no action is a better outcome than taking an action, because we often think that, oh, once there is a problem, we need to solve it. In the zone of design research, it is sometimes one of the outcomes can be that you actually don't need to solve this problem, but you need to work with it. So there's a bit of how design research sort of builds off of systems thinking, but that's not what we are talking about today. And then the UX research piece is, these are studies that are done to examine how people use the products, identify pain points, and then it discusses features that, it also looks at challenges in usability, right? And then it starts to think about features of that particular design that can help solve these new problems that have been picked up on, right? If you look into the word itself, UX, right? UX is the X there is experience, so U is user experience research, right? What that research focuses on is looking at what experience does a person have when they are using a product or your technology that you have developed, right? And you don't need to be a technologist, a programmer, a developer to do this. You need to be somebody who can observe, who can pay attention to detail, who knows how to conduct research. You know how to ask the right questions, right? And you know how to make sense of it. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to the last thing. Now, not the slide, but the last thing in this piece. So whilst these are like 3 research things you can do, there's a critical element in research, because a lot of what this research, different researches that I've mentioned, is a data collection process or a data gathering process. But it is not enough to gather data. Yeah, it is not enough to gather data. You need to be able to make sense of the data you've collected. So a good sense-making process at the end of research is, to my assessment, is it's more valuable, right? It's like the icing on the cake. It changes your, you know how they say the difference between the roadside cake you see and then the one that you pay a lot of money for is the icing. The sense making is sort of the difference between a lot of researchers, because then everybody potentially does research, right? Which is called data gathering, collecting of evidence. But what becomes of that evidence or that data once you collected it? Sometimes it boils down to your sense-making process, right? And very quickly, I'll just mention that your sense-making is how there are existing processes and frameworks that can guide you in sense-making, but you can also come up with the processes and frameworks that make the most sense for you, right? And when you think about processes, one of the first things you want to do when you have collected your research data is to itemize. And when I say itemizing, right, it's like turning your research into your research data. Like if there was an interview and you documented the notes, you want to start to turn that into units, right? You want to itemize it. But units of what? Units of observations and quotes, right? So again, this is you thinking in a qualitative sense, right? If you listen closely, what I'm trying to do is model qualitative research a little closely to quantitative research. Well, quantitative research is that you're dealing with numbers, but here you're dealing with qualitative responses. So what do you do with those qualitative responses? So first thing is trying to itemize, right? That sense-making process starts with sort of itemizing. And what you do when you itemize is that you want to distill those answers you got, those responses you got. And this is not a survey. You want to distill those answers and responses you got into observations and quotes. Once you have done that itemizing, the next thing you want to move on to is a sorting process. So, and some people call this affinity mapping, right? Or snowballing. But basically what you are now going to do in the next stage is that you want to start to group your observations and quotes based on their natural relationship. So if somebody said something, now it doesn't matter if you had interviewed 10 people, it doesn't matter who said what. After you've itemized, it doesn't matter who said what. You are now trying to bring together the information, observations and quotes that were made that look alike or speak to the same event. You are grouping them together, right? That's the sorting process. And through that process, you start to get into analysis. Through that analysis process, you start to get into insight building. And through the insight building, you start to see patterns, right? Once you start to see patterns, opportunities start to emerge. Once you start to see the patterns, opportunities start to emerge. Similar to what you do in life, how do you identify an opportunity? Sometimes some of us see things and we are like, oh, I think there's an opportunity here. And Nigerians are good at that. Just so you know, that's one thing that you have for the mere fact that you were born in Nigeria, you have an innate capacity to see opportunities where other people normally in the world are not able to see opportunities. It is something that you have by just being a Nigerian, or at least growing up in this context. The capacity to see opportunities where other types of human in the world may rarely see opportunities. But this is the point I'm trying to make in relation to research. It's that the thing that precedes you identifying an opportunity as a human, like you're just walking around your day, you do not tell yourself that you're doing research. You are just walking around and you're like, oh, I think this is an opportunity, right? Like any opportunity, right? What precedes that is that your mind has identified a pattern. You saw a pattern. And it is that pattern that just stores your memory or triggers your mind to say something here looks like an opportunity, a pattern that you can recognize. And so that's what we are leading you through in this research process. How do you get to a place where you start to say, these are opportunities that I can take advantage of? Because remember, the goal of all of these types of research that you do is to find opportunities that you can then use to advance the tech that you're working with. Now you've gathered the data. We talked about distilling that data. After you distill that data into observations and quotes, what do you do with the observations and quotes? You start to sort them into similar ones, right? Things that look like they are naturally connected. Once you go through that first process and you start to look at the data that you have categorized or grouped, that's an analytical process. That analytical process will start to build insights. So you write down your insights. As you collect your insights, you will see patterns that will emerge. Based off of those patterns, you will start to see opportunities. I know this is a bit abstract, but that's kind of how it goes. Move to the next slide. Right, project managers. So again, remember that technical intuition is not a job. I just started with that as an innate capability that you should and can have, right? But the research piece are jobs that you can have or things that you can do, even if you're not getting an employment in an organization on those roles, which you can actually get a lot of employment in those roles in a lot of big organizations, right? But even if that's not the case, you can be a consultant that does research. You can do research in your own firm and offer it to technology organizations, right? Or entities. The other thing that you can do is to be a project manager, a program manager, as the case may be. What does a project manager do? A project manager is basically balancing three elements: people, time, and finance or money. That's what project management really is. It boils down to that. Your ability to manage these three things, knowing that they are what? Limited resources. Economics in the room can help us out here. But you get the gist of it, right? These are limited resources. Yeah. People are not unlimited. Money is not unlimited. Time is not unlimited. So how do you manage these three limited resources and yet deliver a project successfully? That's what project management boils down to. And so the first thing I'll mention to you about project management is your ability to estimate the limitations and constraints of your resources. Now, this is being a good project manager. You will be surprised at how much people do not know how to estimate. And I think part of that is also just sort of something that is built into our culture or the way our in our upbringing and our context, our environment, right? If you go to certain parts of the world, I'll be there in 1 hour. And then you think about all the things you know. I mean, this is not someone trying to scam you that they're going to be there at a certain time. That's not what I'm talking about. It's like I'm working with someone. The person is maybe staying at Maitama and coming to meet me at Utako. These are locations in Abuja, and I know not everyone is from Abuja, but sorry about that. So I'm staying in Utako, and then somebody is in Maitama and coming over to meet me. I know that their means of transportation is not public transport, they need to book a boat, right, or book an Uber to get to me, right? I know their means of transportation. But before they come, I know they need to take their bath. And I know that they need to make breakfast. I know that they need to make a phone call to a third person who's supposed to join us for that meeting. And then the person tells me, oh, I'll be there in an hour. Oftentimes, I'm able to estimate whether or not that person can actually fit their existing activities into an hour and still make it. Because I'm thinking, when you book an Uber, you're going to spend about 3 minutes on your phone. Remember that 3 minutes counts in the hour that you are saying you're going to come, right? You're going to spend about 3 minutes on your phone trying to do that. The Uber driver is going to spend some time navigating to you, which isn't easy, right? That's maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. Then you're going to get on the ride. Then you're going to drive down. You're going to consider the hour of the day, the traffic that might be encountered on the way coming to you. Basically, what I'm saying is oftentimes people don't think in this very granular level when they do estimation. It could also be estimation in terms of the money with you, right? A lot of people who become scammers, right? Now I'm talking of fraud, and this is not a criticism or support of fraud, but just putting it out there. One of the primary drivers for people who take some of those actions is that when they hear 1 million naira, right? They think it's an infinite amount of resources. But it's not infinite. And that's also a type of estimation problem because they cannot estimate what 1 million naira is in terms of what it can accomplish. And so that's the reason why, because when they are going in, they think, oh, when I have my first 1 million, I will no longer be involved in this crime or in this act. I'm going to stop. But then you realize that 1 million is 200,000 in 5 places. And it's 100,000 in 10 places. And then there are like already 15 things you need 100,000 for. I don't know if that makes sense, right? Anyway, but that's what we're talking about here. Just using all of those anecdotes to give you a sense of how estimation is a problem. But for you to be a good program manager, a project manager, you need to be great at estimating the limitations of resources. Again, resources in this case is people, time, and money. So know how time works. Know how humans work. Human beings are, in fact, that's even the hardest part. Because you need to understand human behavior, which is quite volatile. Like humans can change on the second. And I'm not talking of outside of work. I'm talking of within work, right? The pace at which they work, what their skills can accomplish, whether they become lazy, whether they keep to time, whether they do the work that they're supposed to do. Anyway, let's move along. The next thing that sort of is very useful for you as a program manager is your ability to organize tasks in sequence, thinking through path dependencies clearly. So first of all is organizing, right? You know what needs to be done, but you need to organize it. And how you organize it has to be in such a way that you think about the path dependencies. So because you know that 10 things need to be done, does not mean that you need to do 10 things in any order. In fact, there's an order in which you do those 10 things that might become problematic. Let's say you're working in a construction site and you're supposed to, I don't know, do a concrete job. If you mix the concrete before the rods have been set up, right? The rods now, the rods that you put in the pillars to make them strong. If you mix the concrete before the rod is set up, you've wasted the material. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So you need to be able to understand sequencing. Even when you are not doing a sort of field work, even in your software-based reality, where everything is just like writing codes and all those things, you need to know what happens before what. Say you are building a tech solution, right? And you hire developers before you complete your market analysis. Let's say market analysis to be sure you need to even build this solution and what that solution will do, right? And you hire developers before then. And these are the developers that you are paying even monthly or per hour or per whatever, right? You have already significantly raised the cost of that project because you have people who don't yet have the accurate evidence for what they're going to develop. So good project management tells you to finish your market research first, define what the product is supposed to be, and then engage your developers. Now, this is another type of problem with organizing and sequencing. Do you wait till you finish your market research before you start to put out a call for hiring developers? No. So if you're a good project manager, you now know how to think about it in terms of lead time. When should I start looking for developers? You know that, the set of developers take about 6 to 8 weeks. And these are just hypothetical numbers I'm throwing out. I'm not saying that's how long it takes. I don't know how long it takes. But you need to think in those terms. Okay, so let me start my search now so that just about the time the market research is ending, we should have found someone who is suitable for the job. Knowing that there is an interview process, there is a simulation process where you tell them to take this assignment and prove that you have the right skills. And then there's the compliance thing that you have to do. So when you think in those terms, you realize that you need to start way ahead of time and not just after you have done that. So all of this dynamic thinking is required for you to be a good project manager. Another element of being a good project manager is your ability to track tasks and activities and ensure that they are accomplished before the deadline. Right? You need to be able to track. So again, remember, you've created activities, right? Which is sort of where we started. You have sequenced them. Now we're talking about something different. You need to track them, right? So perhaps you are not the person who is responsible for hiring the developer. Perhaps you're not the person who is leading the market research. Whoever is doing all of those things, you need to know when they need to end, and you need to be in touch with them to be sure that that is happening. Like, so you can't see that as a project manager and assume that the market research is happening. You need to be in touch to be sure, right? You need to be aware. So there's a bit of that oversight role that you are playing across a team. So which brings me to the next point. You often have a team, right? And I'll make this quick. If you have a bad relationship with the person doing the market research, or you are not someone who can handle relationships with people, right? There is already a problem. If you're fighting with the market researcher, you're fighting with the HR person who is hiring the developer, your project is already on the decline. So you need to have good relationship management to be able to deliver any project as a project manager. You also need good leadership, because then now at this point you are leading a team. Yeah, I'll stop there. Let me not push this too much further, because I think we've done like 30 minutes of talking. Yeah, so next slide. Right, thank you very much, and I hope this has been useful to everyone who is been here today. We can turn it over to questions, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. And I can answer that very quickly. Let's not mix words, right, together. Let's distill what these things mean a little bit, and then we can get into an understanding of what are the potential roles that are in there. So UX, like I was saying earlier on, is short for user experience. And I know you know that the word experience starts with an E, but they have taken away the E and just put the X. So user experience is what UX is. And then UI is user interaction. So UI UX is user interaction / user experience. How does your technology interact with people, or how do people interact with your technology? And what is their experience when they have that interaction? That is what UI UX really looks into, right? Now, there are different roles that are associated with UI UX. One of such roles is what I talked about, which is the UX researcher, right? Or UX research. That is the user experience researcher. That doesn't require any line of code, right? In fact, the UX researcher is also somebody who will do user testing. So in user research, you are looking at potential users to understand what their needs are, their motivations. Oh, sorry, that's user research. In the UX research, sorry, you're looking at how a person uses the technology and what are potential pain points that they encounter and how usable, right? So usability. How usable is the tech? And to do that, you don't need to write a line of code. To do that, you need to interview people that are using the product, right? You need to study people that are using the product. And when you study them, you need to make sense of it. You need to make sense of the data you gather. That's why I talked about the sense-making process. And then you need to recommend feature modifications. So change this one, do it like this, do that like that. No, this does not let the user do this, right? So that's the UX research piece there. And like I said, the UX person also does the user testing. So if you have built a prototype or a version 1 of the tech, it's the job of the UX researcher to go out and meet potential users and say, okay, let me observe you use this solution and see how it does. Now, also to note that another role that is associated with this is the UX design, user experience designer, right? The user experience designer can also be done without significant code writing. And people who use things like Figma and Adobe XP here, I don't use them. I don't think you write codes, or maybe there's a little bit of that. But I think that these programs are already configured in such a way that what you are doing is that you're moving modules around. So there are existing modules. You just need to know how to use the program, and then you can build the design. But the design of the interface, right? As a UX designer, the design of the interface does not bring the product alive. The UX engineer, so this is coding, this is clearly coding, right? Or programming. The UX engineer then needs to build the functionality. So the person who does the interface, is not the same person who does the engineering piece that sort of powers it. But there are also other UI UX roles that are out there. So I think there's the motion design, right? So the motion designer is the person who is thinking about the transitions that you're making, right? It's the person who's thinking about the transitions that a user makes